Hey guys, welcome to episode 3 of the weekly paddle update, the series where I talk about my experiences with the paddles that I've hit throughout the week. Now, one paddle I'm sure many of you are curious about is going to be the Ronbus Ripple. I finally got the chance to hit with the production version more, and of course, I had to hit it side by side compared to the beta. So, out of the box, there are some differences. On the beta, the ripples on the face are much more pronounced compared to the production version. And finally, the swing weight's actually 116 on the newer one compared to 108 on the older one. I believe this is because they added extra glue in the newer one to reinforce the edge guard a bit more. So it is a bit heavier. I did post a video, actually a video short detailing the sound difference bouncing the ball on the newer one versus the beta. And the beta sounds a lot more hollow, but in terms of how they play, they both hit very, very hard. I'd say, if anything, power-wise, I would give it to the production version just because the swing weight's a bit higher, but for pop, they're both about the same. Probably one of like the hardest hitting legal paddles right now. So I'm actually not really sure how these got approved and then some paddles like the Black Ace and Mod got delisted, but these are going to be launching January 31st. I will not have the time to gather all my thoughts and shoot a review by then, but I'll try my best to do a first impression video. Now, other than the ripples, a big chunk of the week was spent getting my thoughts ready and getting the videos ready for some of the upcoming releases like the Carbon True Foams, the 11Six24 Powers, and the Core Super Quartz. So I spent a good amount of time hitting those paddles, and I think I've got all my thoughts settled. I'll be working on those reviews, and I probably won't be hitting those paddles anymore. But one other paddle from 11Six24 that I did hit quite a bit this week was the All Quartz series, so I actually hit all 3 shapes. I did speak about them briefly last week. I did say I was more of a fan of the original Hirachi Control Plus and the Monarch All Quartz, but this week I still think my opinion stands. I think these new All Quartz, they're fantastic paddles. They have like softer feel, there's less power compared to the original ones, and I think one thing about the original All Quartz was that they were a bit stiff feeling, but my gripe with the All Quartz is that they're a bit too similar to the Jelly Bean series. They have a feel off the face, like it's really plush because it is a Gen 1.5 paddle. It hits harder and it's slightly more poppy compared to the Jelly Beans, but it's too similar in their lineup. And I think it just doesn't fit like the way the lineup goes, since it's supposed to be Jelly Beans Control, then their All Quartz, and then their Power. But the All Quartz aren't really in the middle. They're just too close to the Jelly Beans for my liking. That said, I think this is a fantastic paddle. I think people that are newer to the sport or are new to the 11Six24 brand in general, they'll pick this up and they'll really like it. Or they'll go from the Jelly Bean and they can upgrade to this paddle and they'll be completely happy. But I just don't think that they fit the modern definition of All Quartz anymore, because the power is a bit more of a sliding scale, like the way we classify All Quartz or Control. And with the way that the power levels stand now, the original All Quartz are considered All Quartz paddles today. And something like these new All Quartz are more, I'd say, like All Quartz leaning Control, or even Control leaning All Quartz, because they just don't have that power to put them in the All Quartz category like the originals did. But yeah, like I said, they're good paddles. I just like the original ones better, and I just wish these had a bit more power to them, but I still see these as doing very well on the market. Moving on, one paddle I did hit side by side against the All Quartz was actually the new wide body bloom paddles from Vatic Pro. So they actually released this, the bloom shape for the Sagas and also the Prisms. For the Prisms, they have the 16 and 14 millimeters. I haven't hit the Prisms yet, but I'm pretty sure they're going to be very good control paddles, since Vatic finally goes into that wide body shape, and the Prisms are one of the softest paddles in the market. But for the Sagas, this is really similar in construction to the All Quartz, so they're both Gen 1.5 with some small differences to just give them a little bit extra power. And I actually like the Sagas better because there's a bit more dwell time in them and you get more power. There's more plow through overall. I just think the feel's a bit better. With something like the Pegasus All Quartz, I want to say it's because of the way the fiberglass works in here, but the dwell time just isn't as nice. It'll feel like the ball comes off a bit faster, but that velocity doesn't really travel like when you swing on harder shots compared to the Saga. You just get that extra dwell time and then that extra plow through. Overall, just more firepower on the Sagas, and I personally like the feel better. But I will say I do like the shape of the Pegasus better compared to the Blooms. The Blooms are a bit squarish, which is fine, but I do like having the balance a bit higher compared, or higher on the face, which is why I like the slight flare that the Pegasus shape has. But in terms of feel, I do like the Saga series better. All right, next, let's talk about the new C45 paddle from Franklin. So this is a hybrid 14 millimeter paddle. In terms of the construction, Jacob from All Drive No Drop does go into more detail on this. I think he did it on the latest episode of the podcast, but from my understanding, it's double thermoform. So like a whole sheet is thermoformed and then it's cut out into the paddle shape. And then they inject foam channels into the core and then they thermoform it again. So that's my understanding of how this paddle is made. So it's basically Franklin's version of a Gen 3. I was not really excited for this paddle. I wasn't really sure what it was. I knew there was like some drama with Hayden Patrick using it in the pro scene, but Franklin paddles had been underwhelming, so I wasn't really looking forward to this. But I think out of some of the big releases that have come out, this is really quite surprising me. And I actually quite like this one. Without weight though, like if you didn't add any tape to the sides, I think the paddle isn't very good. It's very light. The swing weight was like 105 and twist weight's maybe like, it was somewhere in like the mid fives range. So very low numbers. But once I did add tape, the paddle felt like significantly like much better. For now, I've only added like a little bit, but I can see myself adding a bit more just because that swing weight is so low. But the feel itself is very nice. It's got that like distinct like foamy feel. It's just like much different from what you see from Gen 2 or even Gen 3 paddles. But in terms of firepower, I would say without weight, like maybe it's in that all court leaning power category, and then you can obviously bump it up when you do add weight. So it's got like decent power and pop, but compared to something like a Ripple, which I was also hitting, you know, around the same time, like it's significantly less than that. But I can see like, you know, bumping up the weight, you know, once you get that sweet spot a bit more open, this paddle can be like really good. I personally really like the feel of it. I think it was a really surprising paddle, but I'm actually really looking forward to hitting this one more. All right, let's move on to the last two paddles. So one of them is going to be the Planker. This is from Paddlesshop. It does have a USA Pickleball approved sticker, but this actually is not a USAP approved paddle. So that's just something to keep note of because that price point is really low. This is a $70 paddle. I know some of you heard about this from the last podcast with All Drive No Drop and that discount code wasn't working. I tried it earlier and that discount code is working, and I let them know that it wasn't working for some of you guys, but they also gave me another discount code. So I think I have two now. I'll link both in the video description, but you guys can try it out if you want. But for those of you that are unaware of this paddle, it's basically a Gen 3 that's going for 70 bucks. And after a discount code, that drops down to like 62 or 64, which is a ridiculously crazy deal if it actually replicates a Gen 3. And there have been a lot of paddles some that I've talked about on the channel before that have that propulsion core or that hyperfoam edge wall, but it doesn't actually perform well. But this one, I think it actually is a mod clone. It is very poppy, hits very hard. The firepower is very comparable to a Yola mod. That said, you do get what you pay for because this is a $70 paddle. So its build quality isn't as nice as a mod, I would say. Like there are parts where just, you know, it just doesn't feel as nice. But, you know, for 70 bucks, if you want a Yola mod for rec play, this is really not a bad option. Especially, I think it's actually a hybrid paddle too. So something worth checking out. Just know that it does hit really hard. And finally, the last paddle we're going to talk about is going to be the new silicone edge guard paddles from Gherkin. So I did do a video on their previous TPU line. So that was the one with the normal edge guards. I think that's still a very solid budget paddle line to go for. These new ones they have, I think they're like flagship models, but basically they are a Gen 2 paddle, but instead of having a regular edge guard like this, they have this silicone edge guard, as you can see here. This is actually like their second variation, I want to say, of this paddle. The first one, the edge guard actually provided like a lot of weight, and that one made the paddles really stable because the twist weight was actually really high. Like for an elongated one, the twist weight was like in the low 7s, so it was like 7.12. But at the same time, it did make the swing weight really high too, around like 128. So there was like some trade-offs for it, and now they've upgraded it. So all three of the models, so this comes in the elongated, hybrid, and standard shape. All three, their edge guards are going to be slightly lighter. But basically what the edge guard does is it just gives you a little bit more extra weight compared to a normal edge guard. So you do get like slightly higher numbers. Like now, like the twist weight is still higher than a regular Gen 2 with a regular edge guard, but like so is the swing weight. It does give you a bit more of like a dense and solid feel to it. I think the silicone is like meant to like reduce vibrations as well. So they're just like really small, subtle changes. But I would say the biggest change I can feel about these edge guards is it's actually kind of like soft. So this is pretty resistant to any like scratching or getting scuffed up compared to normal edge guards. That's the one nice thing. But the one thing I did have to get used to is because it's textured like this, and I like to choke up on my two-hander, did have to get used to the texture kind of digging a bit into my hand. It wasn't a big deal, but it just took me like a few games to get used to. Overall, I think they're solid paddles. They're like pretty good Gen 2 paddles, and they're really affordable. I think they reduced the price to like $120 or something after discount code. So I think they're interesting paddles. Like, you could check them out. I don't think they're anything crazy different, especially with a lot of the new tech coming out with some of these recent releases. But for something that's more affordable, like all the Gherkin paddles are very affordable, very good build quality. So yeah, something you could consider. All right, so that's it for this week's episode of the weekly paddle update. Let me know down in the comments below what paddle you're the most excited for. And one last thing, I did forget to do the giveaway for the C2 paddle from the very first episode. So as an apology, I'll be selecting 2 winners from that giveaway. One of you will win a C2 paddle and the other will win a Gherkin paddle. So it is getting quite a bit late here, and I will be doing that maybe tomorrow morning, and I will contact the winners after I figure out who they are. Anyways, that's it. Thanks for watching.